Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! This happened about 25 years ago. Our office moved to a new location in an industrial park in a city. Across the road was a food service company, and they started work very early in the morning. Our company is a large logistics delivery company. We had very limited employee parking along the perimeter of the property. For several weeks, we had random cars in the parking lot every morning. It's important to note that the food company had lots of land but very limited parking. The rest of their property was an overgrown field. I would go over and speak to the manager and request that they remind their employees that they couldn't park on private property. Simple, friendly, and neighborly request. Fast forward a few weeks, and this specific car keeps showing up randomly in our lot. We are not a huge office, and no, there isn't anyone at our office. I made the trek over to the food company across the road and asked them to remind their employee not to park in our lot due to our limited space. The food company office manager started getting irritated, copped an attitude, and told me that their employees would do no such thing and they have all been told not to park in our lot. I'm quite pissed at their attitude, and I'm a petty jerk. We had 2 spare delivery vans that day, so I took the keys and parked one on each side of the car, only a couple of inches from the vehicle. Took the keys with me and waited. I am out of the office for a bit, and lo and behold, we get a call from the food company. They had to work to call in as our office number is unlisted, and they had to go through a 1 to 800 number and work to get routed to the correct office phone. They are all calling because, surprise, apparently an employee wants to go home but cannot get into his car. Cue me coming back to the office, and before moving the vehicles I walked over to the food company and asked them if there was a problem. The office manager sheepishly asked me to move the vans, plug in their employee's car. To which I responded, "You mean the car that doesn't belong to anyone at your office?" I then kindly reminded her that they need to speak to their staff about the parking situation. I moved the vans and watched the guy head out to his car, refusing to look in my direction, and head home for the night. Less than a week later, the field next to the food company was graded and a new gravel parking lot was made. Never saw them park a car on our lot since. I had always been a hard-working man, and I took great pride in my small business. I ran an online store from my home in the wealthy neighborhood of Maple Tree Estate. It's a fake name, and I had always been careful to keep my work separate from my personal life. I made sure that there were no disruptions to my neighbors, and I thought that I was doing everything right. However, the Homeowners Association, or HOA, did not see things the same way. The president of the HOA, Mr. Charles, took issue with me running my business from my home, and he kept fining me for what he saw as a violation of the rules. I tried to explain to Mr. Charles that I was doing nothing wrong, but he was unwilling to listen. He saw my business as a blight on the neighborhood, and he was determined to shut it down. "You can't run a business from your home, John," Mr. Charles told me at one of our HOA meetings. "It is not allowed according to the rules of the community." "Well, I'm not disrupting anyone, Mr. Charles," I replied, trying to remain calm. "I run an online store, and all of my transactions are done over the internet. There is no noise or foot traffic coming to my house." "That may be true, but the rules are the rules," Mr. Charles said sternly. "If you don't stop running your business from your home, I will have no choice but to fine you again." I knew that there was no reasoning with Mr. Charles, so I decided to take a different approach. I began to openly defy the HOA rules, setting up my business in a more visible location in my home and making a point to disrupt the quiet of the neighborhood. At first, Mr. Charles was enraged by my rebellion. He fined me more and more, trying to force me to comply with the rules. But I refused to back down. I believed that I had a right to run my business from my home, and I was not going to be bullied by the HOA. As it turned out, I was not alone in my belief. Many of the other residents of Maple Tree Estate had grown tired of Mr. Charles' heavy-handed approach, and they began to stand with me in my fight against the HOA. One day, Mr. Charles and several members of the HOA decided to take matters into their own hands. While I was away from my house, they broke in and confiscated all of my office equipment and assets. They left a note saying that they would not release the items until I signed a written consent agreeing to stop running my business from my home. What Mr. Charles and the HOA did not know was that my elderly father was in the house at the time of the break-in. When they confronted him, he was terrified and grabbed a gun to protect himself. He held the intruder at gunpoint until the police arrived and arrested them on the spot for charges including break-in and entering and theft. I can't believe they would do something like this. My father said to me when I returned home and found out what had happened, "They have no right to treat you this way." I couldn't believe it either. I felt violated and angry that Mr. Charles and the HOA had thought they could just waltz into my home and take my belongings. But at the same time, I was grateful to my father for protecting our property and standing up for what was right. The news of the incident spread like wildfire, and the residents of Maple Tree Estate were shocked and outraged. Many had grown tired of Mr. Charles' heavy-handed approach and saw the break-in as a clear violation of my rights. After pressing criminal charges against Mr. Charles and the HOA members who had broken into my home, the case went to court. The evidence against them was strong, and it was clear that they had acted illegally in breaking into my home and taking my belongings. The judge ruled in my favor, and Mr. Charles and the HOA members were found guilty of breaking and entering and theft. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison, while the other members were sentenced to probation and ordered to pay restitution for the damages and stolen items. In addition to the criminal charges, Mr. Charles and the HOA members were also forced to resign from their positions before the court verdict was out. The community was in uproar over the incident, and it was clear that they had lost the trust and respect of the residents. I was relieved that justice had been served. The incident had been a trying time for me, but I was glad to have come out on the other side. I was relieved that justice had been served. The incident had been a trying time for me, but I was glad to have come out on the other side. From that point on, I was able to run my business from my home without any further problems. I had learned a valuable lesson about standing up for what I believed in, and I was determined not to let anyone bully me again. Edit. Because some seemed confused about the confiscating part and how they left me a note, but also got arrested on spot. After they managed to confiscate most of the equipment in my office, they left me the note on my desk, but was interrupted when they saw my father closing in on them with his gun pointed at them and ordering them not to move until the cops arrived. A bit of background. I work in the customer care department, the call center, at a local HVAC, appliance, plumbing, and electrical company. If you're living in the Livingston, Wayne, Washtenaw County area in Michigan, you'll probably seen our vans all over the place. And like most HVAC companies out there, we schedule our service calls based on a priority system. If you've ever been asked how old your furnace/AC is, if the company you're calling installed it or not, they are trying to find out what priority you are. Our priority list is as follows. Priority 1. Our installs and our priority service per club members in a no heat, no cool, or no hot water situation. Priority 2. Any customer who's 10+ year old equipment. Any person who's come into our building's parts department to request service. And any employee-recommended customer must be in a no heat, no cool, no hot water situation. Priority 3. Any previous customer with under 10-year-old equipment in a no heat, no cool, no hot water situation. Priority 4. New customer was under 10-year-old equipment in a no heat, no cool, no hot water situation, and any non-emergent cause, i.e. the unit is noisy or customer needs a tech to change a filter, things that aren't, oh god, it's 20 degrees out and I can't get my furnace to work and it's freezing, please help me. Now this can be a bit flexible and it doesn't take things like carriers, the brand we sell, warranty request into account. But it's a fairly standard guide so we can get to customers who have already paid us a ton of money and customers who we can sell new furnaces to before handling people who are probably not going to purchase a new furnace through us, i.e. they are just gonna want repairs or they will end up calling their manufacturer to get the repair covered under warranty instead of going through us. We also run Monday to Saturday for regular service calls. Through Saturdays are usually a lighter day because it's Saturday and we know our techs don't want to work a full day on a Saturday. Can't really blame them, I don't either. Each tech usually gets about 3 to 4 calls on Saturday versus 6 to 7 on Monday to Friday. Also, all names have been changed for privacy so I don't get busted if this gets famous. Now onto the malicious compliance. To set the scene, it's Saturday morning around 9 AM and the call center is about 5 minutes away from getting slammed with calls because it's the first cold day of the fall/winter in Michigan, around 30 degrees to give you an idea. And we're currently accepting priorities 1 and 2 for Saturday's schedule. All others are being booked out to the following week. Suddenly, an email pops up from our HVAC manager, Tommy. It says, per Ken, our owner, we are open to all service calls today. We are panicking in the office because that means we have to take anything and everything that comes in, non-emergent or otherwise. Our dispatcher Eliza texts Tommy to make sure that he's serious, and it turns out that he is. Take anything that comes in, we have to be aware that this is one of the coldest days so far and be sympathetic to that. He replied, this isn't the first time our owner has tried to pull one of those say yes to everything moves, and since our call center manager isn't answering her phone, we decide to say screw it. You want anything that comes in? You got it. Almost immediately after he sent that text, we were slammed by customers calling in, mostly new furnaces that were under other companies' warranties that had no heat. And non-emergency calls like noisy furnaces and filter changes. We took every single one of them. By the time our manager Megan had woken up to see the storm, about an hour after Tommy sent his email, we had already filled up the schedule, each tech having about 7 calls each. Unfortunately, Megan told us to close the schedule down and book anything else we got in for Monday or after. But that hour of saying yes to every customer was cathartic. Part of me wishes that Megan would have let it continue because, unfortunately, both Tommy and Ken tend to pull this stuff every time we switch over from heating to cooling, and they need to see what happens when you take everything and say yes to every single customer's request. However, I also know that it's important to get that back on track so our customers don't get screwed over. My ex and I split after he had an affair. He is a narcissist and I only stated seeing the emotional abuse clearly as I got out of the relationship and started therapy. Well, it turns out his mother has a problem too. I started unfriending all his family on Facebook. After 2 years of not talking to any of them, I didn't see the point in having them around. The latest has been his siblings. There are other reasons I still have his mother as a friend, but I don't want to go into them as it's a little too much detail. I don't need my ex or his mother coming at me for this. Once that stuff is over, I'll just remove her as a friend, but for now, I need to be petty. His mother is freaking if I remove her, she won't see the photos I share of the kids. She wants to see what the kids do at both houses. Well, so do my parents, but they don't get that. My ex doesn't care about them and he doesn't do Facebook. What I noticed is that the ex-mother-in-law has been taking my photos and sharing them with her friends and family. She has 1,000 plus friends. A lot of them she doesn't even know that well. I don't want her sharing the photos, but she won't stop. So, my bitty revenge. She doesn't get to see a lot of my posts. I put her on one of those all friends accept thing. The only photos she gets to see are those that have me in them. She can see the kids, but she gets to see my face too, and she doesn't like sharing those ones. She hasn't said anything yet, but I am sure she's seething. She's the only family member left on his side, and our mutual friends are only my parents. And they won't share things with her now that I've told them what's going on. It really is pity. My friends tell me so, but it feels good. She can't exactly say that she doesn't get to see photos of the kids. Edit. All those saying I should stay in the middle, I do. All those saying I'm using the kids as pawns, that's your prerogative. I'm using their photos, not the children. Nothing has changed about the photos I take, just the way they are shared online, and I haven't said anything to the kids about any of it. What happens when I cut her out completely for my own mental health? Am I a complete jerk then? I'm going to have to mute the notification somehow though. I want to respond, but I need to work and I have a girls' weekend planned and like to avoid my phone when with them. We often even forget to take photos, we're so in the moment. I am not sure if this qualifies as pro-revenge or regular revenge, but I am sure it surpasses pity revenge. Okay, so a bit of backstory. I'm an autistic BIPOC and have struggled with mental illness since I was a child. I also have a narcissistic mother who used to regularly go nuclear on me for essentially just being a kid with disabilities. Anywhoosies, I had a racist Karen neighbor who used to call the police every time I had a meltdown. My jerk mother used this as a justification to punch me, ruin my birthdays, be a jerk, tell me to shut up whenever I got even remotely upset, which effectively taught me that my well-being didn't matter and that expressing any level of distress made me a nuisance and a bad person. Something which, even with therapy, I'm struggling to unlearn as an adult. To be clear, I'm aware that my soon-to-be ex-mother's actions are her own and that she made her choices independent of my racist neighbor. That has been a huge part of my therapy. For context, we live on a Section 8 housing voucher, and there used to be a policy where if police were called frequently enough, the voucher would be revoked and it would be removed and banned from the program. The second that policy was overturned, the calls to the police stopped. Years passed and earlier this year my neighbor decided to move. Cue the most based revenge plot I have ever hatched. I am honestly shocked that I had this in me. I went on one of those day-ruined websites and ordered her a glitter bomb just a few days before it was time for her to move out. No way was she getting her security deposit back. I made sure to spring for extra fine glitter to ensure that it does the job. 2 days after I placed the order, I was reading Eddie Munson X-Reader fanfiction when I heard the loudest door slam from her unit in my life. My work was done. It would be a miracle if she got her deposit back behind that. If I did my job right, this racist witch was out of thousands of dollars. 2 days later she was gone. And the best part about it was that the policy of excessive police calls resulting in voucher termination was overturned almost 2 decades ago. Meaning she probably doesn't have the faintest clue who did this or why. Revenge is truly a dish best served cold. As for the narcissistic mother, I plan to terminate our relationship effective immediately once I have the finances to move out, which I feel is satisfactory enough. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.